Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. For today's case, we have a spicy one. It is a case dealing with the rights of transgender prisoners, specifically whether or not the government can be compelled to pay for gender reassignment surgery for prisoners. So this is a case out of the Ninth Circuit. So we're going to read this case and see what they have to say. And it's a really interesting case dealing with health law. It is the first court that has said that there is a right to gender reassignment surgery to the point that the government has to pay for it, for prisoners or otherwise. So it's a very notable case. It's a very controversial case. Let's get started with reading this. The Eighth Amendment prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. The amendment embodies broad and idealistic concepts of dignity, civilized standards, humans, and decency. Consistent with the values embodied by the Eighth Amendment for more than 40 years, the Supreme Court has held that deliberate indifference to serious medical needs of prisoners constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. When prison authorities do not abide by the Eighth Amendment duty, the courts have responsibility to remedy the resulting violation. So, as a general rule, this is true, right? Prisoners cannot care for themselves, obviously, because they're in prison. So, as a general rule, prisons do have to supply the health care needs of prisoners. To the degree to which this should fall inside that scope is, of course, controversial at best, because, not all things have to be remedied, but really serious ones do. So we're trying to fit this into a generally accepted principle, but it's the first time a court is saying it, so yeah. Adree Edmo, formerly Mason Dean Edmo, is a male-to-female transgender person in the custody of the Ohio Department of Correction. Edmo's sex assigned at birth, male, differs from gender identity, female. The incongruity is such that causes Edmo to experience persistent distress, so severe it limits the ability to function. Both sides and the medical experts agree. Edmo suffers from gender dysphoria, a serious medical condition. They also agree the appropriate benchmark regarding treatment is the World Professional Association of Transgender Health Standards for Care for Health of Transsexual, Transgender, and Gender Nonconforming People. Wow, that's a lot. That's just a lot to say. WPATH sounds easier. And the state does not seriously dispute that in certain circumstances, surgery can be medically necessary treatment for gender dysphoria. The parties dispute about whether this is a medically necessary for this patient, a question we analyze with deference to the district court. Following 4 months of intensive discovery and a 3-day evidentiary hearing, the district court concluded that the surgery is medically necessary and ordered the surgery. So yeah, the district court did a full evidentiary hearing, a full record of it, but still, it's the first time a court anywhere has said that that the state must do gender reassignment surgery. So that is, a big deal for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which are political reasons, in terms of like the implications of that, and the degree to which other prisoners might be seeking male to female status or female to male status for potential perceived advantage. So even if this particular prisoner is a legitimate case, trying to figure out the implications as it applies to other prisoners is problematic at best. And the fact that it's male to female, again, without more, you would assume that this person would have body mass issues that would persist despite the transitioning. So they may pose a threat because of their nature in a female prison. In the same way that male to female athletes tend to perform much better than their female counterparts. So let's proceed on. The district court's detailed factual findings were amply supported by careful review of extensive evidence and testimony. Indeed, they're essentially unchallenged. The appeal boils down to a disagreement about the implications of the findings. Crediting, as we must, the district court's logical, well-supported factual findings, we hold the responsible prison authorities have been deliberately indifferent to the gender dysphoria in violation of the Eighth Amendment. The record before us, as construed by district court, establishes that Edmo has a serious medical need, that the appropriate treatment is the surgery, and prison authorities have not provided the treatment despite full knowledge of the ongoing suffering. The district court entering the injunctive relief is therefore affirmed. I don't know the question about whether or not they'd be transferred to a women's prison, presumably. I don't know the issue about, what changes in their treatment will be implicated by this, but presumably there are some, and that's one of the reasons that this kind of thing is cautionary at best. It's like, even if this particular case warrants a particular resolution, when we talk about applying the law equally to everyone, equal protection in the law, we have to be concerned about the future. And so we have to be concerned about different things that might happen. Yeah. Transgender individuals have gender identity disorders, a deeply felt inherent sense of gender that does not align with their sex assigned at birth. Gender dysphoria is therefore a distress caused by discrepancy between a person's gender identity and a person's sex assigned at birth and the associated gender role and sex characteristics. Each expert in this case relied on the WPATH standards of care in rendering their opinions. As the state acknowledged to the district court, the WPATH standards of care provide the best guidance and are the best standards out there. Based on the best available science and expert professional consensus, the WPATH standards of care provide flexible clinic guidelines to meet diverse healthcare needs of people. And the flexible guidelines, again, are an issue of concern, at least to me, because anytime you have flexibility in your guidelines, you have more and more people who can potentially take advantage of it, exploit it for perceived advantages. And so the flexibility of it is a problem too. So it's nice in the respect that you can cover more people, but it's problematic in that it's hard to determine the legitimacy of people claiming a particular status. So the flexibility is both, like many things, is a two-edged sword. The WPATH standards of care state that many individuals find comfort with their gender role and expression without surgery. So surgery isn't necessarily required by those experiencing gender dysphoria or those who are transgender. For others, however, surgery is essential and necessary to relieve gender dysphoria. That group cannot achieve relief from dysphoria without modification of the primary or secondary sex characteristics. And for those who are not requiring surgery, who are prisoners, again, some of these issues raise large, right? So if you're male to female and you don't require surgery, so that you still have everything you came with, and you're transferred to a female prison, presumably that might be a problem. Presumably that might potentially put female suspects or female prisoners in potential harm's way. So if you're doing surgery, that's one thing. But if you're not doing surgery, because not everyone who has gender dysphoria, according to the court and according to WPATH standards, not everyone will require surgery. So you have a female with male secondary characteristics. Does that pose an issue as it relates to where they're going to be housed and issues of female safety and so forth and so on? So yeah, there's a lot of concerns built into this. Let's press on. I believe it does say what they were convicted of, and I think I might have highlighted it at some point, so we may get to it. I think at some point I did highlight it, so we might get to that. In summary, the broad medical consensus in the area of transgender health care requires providers to individually diagnose, assess, and treat dysphoria, including those for individuals in institutionalized environments. Treatment can and should include surgeries when medically necessary. And I would just note before we get to the issue of what this particular prisoner was sentenced from, that women convicted of violent crimes go to women prisons. So should that in any way matter? If a male to female transgender is just a woman as much as any other woman, and they commit a violent crime, then shouldn't they be in a female prison? Despite the fact that they potentially have body mass and sex characteristics that may pose a threat. So is whether or not they've been convicted of a violent crime relevant in this analysis? And if so, why? These are good questions to ask. Edmo is a transgender woman in custody. The sex was assigned male, but she identifies as female. Edmo has been incarcerated since pleading guilty in 2012 to sexual abuse of a 15-year-old male at a house party. So there you go. Sexual abuse of a minor. How are we feeling now? Edmo was 21 years at the time of the criminal offense. At the time of the evidentiary hearing, she was 30 years old and due to be released in 2021. While incarcerated, Edmo has changed the legal name to Adree Edmo and the sex on birth certificate to female. Throughout incarceration, Edmo has consistently presented as female, despite receiving many disciplinary offenses for doing so. To alleviate Edmo's gender dysphoria, prison officials have, since 2012, provided hormone therapy. Edmo has filed and complied with hormone therapy regimen, which alleviates gender dysphoria to some extent. Which then again, to my conservative mind, I'm like, is undergoing hormone therapy required? If they don't undergo therapy, can they still be considered transition? It's like, what are the rules around this is always a concern to me, at least. Hormone therapy has not completely alleviated Edmo's dysphoria. Edmo continues to experience significant distress related to the incongruence. Much of that distress is caused by secondary sex characteristics. Edmo testified that she feels depressed, embarrassed, and disgusted by that, and that she's every day has reoccurring thoughts. Yes, they're catering to this in the taxpayer dollars. Yes, the taxpayer is paying for all this. On the merits, the district court concluded Edmo have established the Eighth Amendment cruel and unusual punishment claim, which, I don't know that I follow, because the punishment is kind of in their own mind in some way. All we did was put you in prison for what you did. You're the one who did it, and it's the same prison everyone else is in. So, I don't know, but that's what the court said. It then concluded the surgery was medically necessary to treat the dysphoria. Finally, the district court explained the state was deliberately indifferent to dysphoria because it failed to provide them with available treatment that's generally accepted in the field as safe and effective despite actual harm and ongoing risk of harm. After analyzing the merits, the district court concluded that Edmo satisfied other prerequisites for the relief. I'm laughing because of the music, not because of the case. That's why I'm laughing, in case you're wondering. I've got music in the background. I know you can't hear it, but I'm laughing because this guy's going, yeah. It's just like, okay. It's like, I'm laughing because of that, in case you're wondering. Okay, I'm trying to press through. Having concluded that Edmund was entitled to injunction, the court ordered the state to provide Plaintiff with adequate care, including the gender conformance surgery. It ordered the state to take all actions reasonably necessary to provide the surgery as promptly as possible and no later than 6 months from the date of the order. We apply the dictates of the Eighth Amendment today in an area of increased social awareness, transgender health care. We are not the first to speak on the subject, nor will we be the last. Our courts and others have been considering Eighth Amendment claims brought by transgender prisoners for decades. During that time, the medical community's understanding of what treatments are safe and medically necessary to treat gender dysphoria have changed as more information becomes available, research is undertaken, and experience is gained. The Eighth Amendment inquiry takes account of that developing understanding. We hold that, where, as here, the record shows that medically necessary treatment for prisoner gender dysphoria is gender-conforming surgery, and responsible prisoners deny such treatment with full awareness of prisoner suffering, those officials violate the Eighth Amendment prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. So that is the end of our current coverage of the case of Adree Edmo versus Idaho Department of Correction. In this case, we learned that Mr./Miss Edmo is a transgender person who wants gender reassignment surgery. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for the first time is saying that gender reassignment surgery is required to be provided to prisoners who are in need of it. So it's a new decision in the law, a new finding from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Controversial, of course, and we'll see how it develops. We'll see if the U.S. Supreme Court case wants a piece of it, but for our current purposes, that's the end of our coverage, and that's the end of that. Thank you for joining me as we both read this case together and now better understand the law. If you're enjoying this legal education content, please subscribe to this channel. It really helps us grow. And check out one of our other videos, including the one that's currently being displayed on the thumbnail on screen. Thank you so much for your continued support. And until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.